So we are just going to get started in a moment. I've just discovered that our star keynote speaker, Liz, was delayed on her bus. She is now in the building and she's just logging on now. And if she manages to log on in the next couple of minutes, then we will, as planned, keep to the schedule I planned, which is for Liz to do the keynote first and then me to do my session after. If she is a little more delayed in getting logged on, then basically I'll start in a couple of minutes and I will do my session first, and then we'll get Liz logged on and we'll swap the order that way round. So oh, hello, Paul Courtney, on your road trip, and Caroline. So I'm going to give it another minute and okay, I think Liz is there. Hello, Liz, can you hear me?
Hi, Rob. I don't know if everyone can hear me or just you.
Yeah, we can all hear you. Sorry you've had a nightmare journey in.
I'm sorry to be a little bit late.
Don't worry at all. The good news is I can see you and I can hear you, which that means everyone else can. And I think if you're okay and you've got your slides at your end, then yeah. I will do my couple of minutes of welcome to everyone. And if you're all set, then we'll keep to the order plan, which is for you to do your session first. Is that all right?
Sounds great. Thanks, Rob.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Good. So thank you, everybody, for your patience. We are going to get moving. And it goes like this. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much. Goodness me, there's other things you could be doing on a Wednesday morning, and you made time to join our Breakfast Club for Fundraising Leaders, and I really appreciate it. Katie let me know yesterday that we had 724 people register, many from the UK, but also from Australia and Budapest and various places around the world. So wherever you are, thank you for making time for this and helping create this community of fundraisers who are helping each other out and learning together. And if you've not, I've seen lots of faces of names I've seen over and over again, so thank you to you season ticket holders. But if you've not come before, the purpose of this session, I do them 4 times a year. I've been doing it for 6 or 7 years. And idea one is if we can share some examples and stories and tips, principles that help you in your leadership and your fundraising, and or maybe just give you a little bit of oomph, little pep. And then secondly, some of these techniques or examples you might choose to pass on to your team. And Liz and I will do our best to give you some of those ideas. For best results in a session like this, please do have a notebook or some way of capturing your ideas as we go through. Just be on the lookout for those 1, 2, or 3 things that are really worth following through on, and you can see they would help, but write them down. The key thing is to capture them rather than hope they'll still be with you in 2 hours time. And the other thing is, lots of us are good at making time to do the listening or the reading, but the bit of the learning loop that often gets skirted over is planning ahead sometime when you're going to reflect on what ideas you got today and what you're going to do about it, or who you're going to tell. So deciding on that now, I have found, increases the chances that we'll do our best to make it interesting and entertaining, but really what you want is useful. To make it useful, then I recommend you plan when you might do that. At the end of Liz's session, we're going to have just a few minutes in order to pose a couple of questions to her. So if during her talk you have a question, please do type in the chat what your question would be, but so that we can find it in amongst all the comments. If you could start it with the word question in capitals, then my colleague Katie and I are most likely to be able to find it. Okay, so in terms of the structure, in a moment, my colleague Liz, she's going to do a talk about big audacious goals, what she's learned over the years about how to put those into practice to help you with your fundraising rather than the potential fears and downsides of that approach, which are understandable. And then after that, I'm going to do a talk about what I found to be very effective when you look for small. So big and small are valuable, the compound effect in fundraising. And we plan to get you finished in advance of 10 o'clock by about 5 to 10 if we possibly can. If you like this kind of content, hearing examples and tactics and so on, then, and you've not tried it before, do check out my podcast. It's called Fundraising Bright Spots. I know many of you are subscribed already, but we've now got 99 episodes created so far, some on leadership, most of them just about fundraising techniques and strategies and examples. So it's on various platforms. Do check it out if you've not already. If you like this style of learning by hearing the stories to inspire you for what is possible. So I'm going to take my slides away now. And if Liz is able to find her slide share button and start to bring up those slides. My guess is many of you may know Liz, but if you don't, she's a very experienced fundraiser. I think originally her speciality was individual giving, but for years she's done some really interesting roles in leading fundraising teams, originally at Battersea Dogs and Cats Home. And I'm not going to give you the numbers, but when I've interviewed Liz before, I was just staggered by the level of growth. And Liz would say, of course, it wasn't just about her leadership, but I do find it interesting that while she was the leader of that organization, there was phenomenal growth in fundraising, which enabled that charity to really make some wonderful progress in its mission. She's also worked at Teenage Cancer Trust, and she's currently at Great Ormond Street Hospital Children's Charity. And if you're okay, good to go, Liz. Without more ado, I bid you a very warm Breakfast Club welcome to the event.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rob. I'm really sorry, but it says the host has disabled sharing. Right. You know that message that yes. Zoom sometimes gives you. I don't know how easy that is to.
So I'm gonna I could share the slides from my end, but it'd probably be simpler. Katie, sure. If you're there, would you be able to see if you're able to click that button, enable Liz to share her slides?
Hi, Liz. Can you make me co-host, please, Rob? And then I can do that.
Yes.
Let's see if that will work. Aha, this is looking hopeful. Here we go.
That should work now, Liz.
Katie.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to have to tell me what you can see.
We can see the slides, but not in the full screen view. I don't know if there's at the bottom. There you go. Now it's perfect.
Is that any good? Brilliant. Apologies that I got caught on the bus this morning, so not as seamless as I would have liked. But I'm really pleased to be invited to join the Breakfast Club today. I always find it's a really helpful exercise to think about, actually, what have I learned over the years? So I've really enjoyed preparing for today, and I'm really hoping that I can share a few things that I've learned in my time as a fundraiser and 12 years as being a fundraising director. I'm pretty sure that most of what I'm about to share isn't rocket science, and I'm sure there's lots of people on this call who've got their own experience of setting and delivering big ambitious goals. But I do hope that there's one or two things that I say that are either thought-provoking or one or two of the tools that prove helpful to you in your roles. So I'll crack on, and I want to actually start by, hopefully this will move on. Yeah, there we go. I want to start by reflecting that actually setting big goals isn't easy. I mean, especially and importantly, because we rarely do this alone. We have to work with many other people, with teams, often big teams, with lots of stakeholders, and all the way up to trustees, and all of whom come at it with their own perspective and their own experience. So there's a lot to manage when you're thinking about where do you set your sights and what should your goals be. And none of us have a crystal ball. I wish we did, particularly in the environment in which we've been working over the last 2 years. And as a fundraising leader, We have to own the strategy, we've got to own the numbers, because ultimately we're the ones that are held accountable for the delivery. So it's a really tough thing to do. So where do you even begin? And I think I could probably talk for hours about how you go about developing a fundraising strategy and everything I've learned. But in the interest of time, I'm going to massively simplify some things today and share hopefully some specific techniques that I've found over the years help to set really big ambitions. And they're techniques that I've used time and again and have refined along the way. And to be honest, I'm probably now at the point where I don't really know how to do it another way. And I'd like to bring this to life by sharing a little bit about where we are on our journey at Great Ormond Street charity. And so it's with Gosh really that I'd love to start. And we were at the point, it was towards the end of 2020. I know Alex is on the call, she'll remember it well, when we set out to develop a new fundraising strategy here, which was very much going to be built on the successes of the past. And you can see from this graph, this shows you the history that we were looking at the time. This graph I actually created for my interview. And you can see that we weren't doing badly. Actually, Gosh had achieved a lot of success over the years. There'd been steady year-on-year growth. And it meant that Gosh had a lot going for it. We had a relatively broad and balanced portfolio of fundraising. And crucially, we support as a charity an incredible world-leading hospital, and they have really big ambitions. So that has helped us along our journey. What you can't see so much from this graph, and something our CEO described to me before I joined, was that our income was relatively lumpy. Actually, over time, we benefited from large philanthropic gifts, which was amazing, but they come in some years, not others. And with a big capital project having just come to an end at Gosh, and also an underlying trend of decline in our regular giving base, actually that it wasn't going to change unless we did something about it. So the opportunity and the challenge for us at Gosh was to create a fundraising strategy that matched the hospital's ambitions with a landmark capital appeal, but also helping us to grow our underlying sustainable income for the charity. So that's where we decided to focus. And the next two slides come from a presentation that I think I gave the team. I mean, frankly, the time had never been worse. We're talking December 2020. Many of you remember that time. We would have faced very similar challenges. We were mid-pandemic, and we were thinking about, well, how do we emerge from the pandemic stronger than before? Yet we were working in a context where Christmas had just been cancelled. We were going into the depths of another lockdown. It was really hard professionally and personally to plan for the future. And it was quite hard at that time to imagine a time when events would return, face-to-face fundraising would flourish again. Everything around us was uncertain. Yeah, again, this slide I presented to the team, I passionately believe that the time had never been better. Actually, at Gosh, 3 directorates used to be responsible for fundraising. We'd just merged into one. We had a new organisational strategy. As I've described, we had some brilliant foundations on which to build. In 2020, NHS charities have never been more relevant. Yet we felt that we clearly needed to evolve our approach, and equally at time of crisis can help to drive innovation. And last but very much not least, we had and still have a really exciting and transformational capital project to fundraise for. So yes, we were very uncertain, but we felt by developing a plan, we would create more certainty and enable more momentum. So we decided to go for it. And with a huge team effort across December and into January 2021, we pulled together a fundraising strategy that we're really proud of and really excited to be working towards. We knew that the external environment would continue to change, but we believed having a plan, even if it was a flexible plan, would enable us to evolve and help us to come out stronger. And I've got 6 key things that I would like to share with you today, some suggestions that I think help if you want to be in the business of setting big goals. And the first one is really quite simple. And I've learned over the years, actually you start with your people. If on balance, most of our fundraisers, they know their stuff, and actually the answers lie with them around where the greatest gain will come. And more often than not, if your people are asked the right questions, they're given the permission, they're given the right parameters, they will set targets more ambitious than you ever would. And sometimes that's a little bit nerve-wracking. So I always start bottom up, using bottom-up planning and budgeting. I'm sure many of you do this too, but I'm a passionate believer in it. And in fact, I've never worked with top-down budgeting where you're given a figure that you have to meet. So working with teams, I believe in giving templates for numbers that consistently capture those numbers, templates for the teams to capture some narrative to support their plan and to support their ambition. And that's because I think by enabling fundraisers, on the whole, we're ambitious people. We want to do the best for our organisation. And my view is fundraising's role is to give the charity the most amazing choices about how it can increase its impact for the people or animals that it's there to help. So by showing the art of the possible around what fundraising can do, that can really unlock brilliant thinking in the rest of the organisation. So for every area of fundraising, I mentioned I provide templates, and I want to show you some of those questions that I've used pretty consistently in my last 3 roles. And again, these come directly from the templates given to the team. So for every area of fundraising at Gosh, I asked them to tell me what was the scale of the growth opportunity, what were other charities doing, what have we done to date, what are the challenges to growth, because not all areas can grow. What does best in class look like for Gosh? What investment and resources might be needed? What KPIs would we set ourselves if we were to set growth goals in this area? And importantly, what support would be needed from the rest of the charity to do that? And last but not least, I would then also ask, well, if we had different scenarios and you were to give me 3 different versions of your projections, what would happen if we carry on as we are, if we're being relatively conservative? What would happen if we were to aim for modest growth? And equally, how about transformational growth? And that really helps to unlock different thinking. But my second tip is, as much as possible, to liberate kind of long-term thinking for teams. I think often teams are caught in a cycle of having to think about in-year return, in-year net income, in-year ROI and cost-income ratio. So setting the parameter that what you want teams to focus on is long-term net income can be a really powerful tool. One team at Gosh said to me, they'd always had to focus on maximising the in-year net from a particular product, which meant they couldn't invest in it and therefore it couldn't grow. Yet as soon as they started to think about what the 10-year picture could look like, it really did change things. So focusing the conversation on long-term net is really important. I always ask the colleagues that I work with to present their numbers over 10 years. So I've only ever developed 10-year fundraising strategies. Many of you on the call will know, and Rob mentioned that I started my fundraising life in individual giving. And I think from most areas of public fundraising, we know that it takes at least 5 years to deliver significant growth if you're going to invest. So showing the potential over a long-term period can be really, really powerful. Doesn't mean you have to stick to your 10-year plan. And clearly, you get to review it every year when you set your budgets. But it does mean that every decision you make is quite different if you root it in what will this area of fundraising generate over 10 years rather than what will it deliver this year. It's a more informed choice and often different choice that the organisation can make as a result. Also, I think taking a long-term view helps you be very clear about what you should focus on. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but particularly which areas of fundraising will deliver the greatest long-term gain. And at Gosh, we're just over a year into our 10-year strategy, so just entered year 2. We're roughly a 50 million net income charity a year from our fundraising. Yet by the end of 5 years, we want to have almost double that. And over the period of 10 years, we're aiming to raise 912 million in net income. It's particularly powerful when you present long-term numbers to trustees. It helps move the conversation into a very different place. It becomes about the legacy that they might leave as trustees to the charity beyond their lifetime. on the board. And I remember once presenting a fundraising strategy to the board. None of us expected it to be approved, actually. We thought it was too ambitious, had too much investment. But as soon as trustees started to think about actually what would the organisation look for decades to come, it presented a very kind of positive picture for them and received their support. So this is the growth potential. I'll show it quickly on the screen that we're looking at GOSH. This is the net income of 912 million over 10 years. We think that's a really big, audacious goal. One of our trustees would have quite liked me to round that up to 1 billion over 10 years. Who knows, we may well do it. But no matter how big your goals are, there will always be some people who encourage you to go even bigger. I've mentioned a little bit how long-term projections help give you focus, and I believe passionately in this, because to deliver ambitious goals, it really does take focus. Most fundraising teams, and I include GOSH in this, we're guilty of doing too much, and that comes from a really, really good place because we care about our activity, but usually it's just a few things that make the biggest difference. And looking at our 10-year numbers, we know that there are 3 areas of fundraising that will deliver 3/4 of the net income over the next 10 years. And that really helps to focus the mind about where do you put your resource, your energy and your effort. And I'll show you in a moment a tool I've used over the years when helping to develop strategy and helping teams to begin to think about focus. You've probably seen it before, but the simple kind of 9-square grid where you look at impact versus effort to implement different activities. And this is a great exercise to do with teams, to do with different parts of the organisation, marketing, communications, finance, even up to trustees, to get everyone thinking about where should we focus, what is going to deliver the greatest gain for us. And for me, I guess working at GOSH and the size of organisation we are, really we need to focus on those areas of our portfolio that in the green boxes, even if they're hard to achieve, if they're going to deliver 7-figure net income streams, then they for us are the ones that we should be focusing on. So I hope that helps give one simple tool to use with teams. And I want to touch briefly then on the next technique that I find really helps to get buy-in for ambitious plans, and that's to create different scenarios. I've touched on this in terms of the templates that are provided to teams to help capture their numbers. And then part of my job as the process is to consolidate numbers and to articulate what do the different opportunities mean around investment and what long-term net could we deliver overall. So I've always presented fundraising strategies to trustees in the context of 3 choices or 3 different scenarios. And without fail, trustees have always gone for the most ambitious scenario when they can take a long-term view and there's that sense and feeling of choice and control. It's something that's really helped to unlock investment, particularly in areas such as public fundraising. The other scenarios that I find really helpful for managing upwards are sensitivity analysis scenarios, working with finance to look at what does it mean for the organisation's reserves, can it be afforded, and actually what is the worst that would happen. So when we presented our strategy to GOSH, we also presented a range. So if what the worst that we would deliver is 773 million in net income over 10 years, actually the best case scenario is over a billion in net incomes. And I think that helps to provide reassurance in making an ambitious kind of choice in the short term. Also with managing upwards, particularly trustees and stakeholders, I believe in the power of using evidence and evidence-based decision-making, as well as expert opinion where it's relevant to do so. It can really help build the confidence of trustees and other teams who may not understand the fundraising landscape as well as you do. And it helps root your suggestions in insight around what's happening in the external market, looking at benchmarking, looking at competitors. And again, it can be really powerful to be able to present your plans in the context of what other charities are achieving and doing, because more often than not, colleagues internally and all the way up to trustees also have that sense of ambition for the organisation and don't want to really be left behind. The sixth area I want to focus on, but it really is the most important one. I started with people and the role that they have to play in developing big, audacious goals. Yeah, I mean, strategy and figures that support strategy are only words and numbers on a page if you don't have the people to deliver it and the will to deliver it. I think involving teams from the start makes sure that when they see the strategy, they see their words in the strategies, they see their numbers, they own those numbers, they feel confident in going after them. On the whole, you know, I must reflect that not everyone will always feel comfortable when you set really big growth goals, and not everyone will believe it. I remember at Battersea, probably about 5 years after being there, one of the team said to me, Liz, you know, when you first presented to us, I thought you were mad. You showed us all those numbers on the screen and it sounded really exciting and I went with it, but I didn't think it was actually possible. So I want to go back for a moment now to GOSH, because I think that in particular, talking about collaborative culture and how you set that to deliver ambitious goals, it is important. On the whole, what we found during a very uncertain time was that having an ambitious strategy got our fundraisers really excited. It was key for us to start putting our strategy into action. That meant some changes for us as a team, but it also meant that we began to break down silos, because we were clear that we wouldn't be able to achieve our goals unless we worked really well together. And a couple of months ago, we had a brilliant example as a fundraising team where we came together to try and win a significant Charity of the Year partnership. It was a really important partnership to us, worth 20 million over the next 5 years. And it really, really matters. And we were up against a couple of other really big charities. We, as you can imagine, don't have a great track record in Charity of the Year votes because we're largely a London-based hospital. And I've recently learned that we were seen as the underdog actually by the other charities involved. But the way we approached that together, everyone got involved, not just across fundraising, but across the whole organisation. It was a brilliantly galvanising experience, to the extent that we had a lot of fun and really, really enjoyed it. And had we not won at the end of that process, I think we'd still be really proud of how we worked together. I've never seen a whole organisation galvanised behind an opportunity before. And I believe that comes from a spirit of collaboration, to the extent that we had colleagues who were away in other countries having a wonderful time on holiday who were emailing us saying, you know what, this week I wish I was back at GOSH and part of this process. And last night, one of my colleagues said to me that it was the highlight of her working career, that week together, all collaborating. And I think it's times like that that really give you the chance to put your kind of philosophy and into practice, and a culture of collaboration underpins that. To finish, I'm just going to show you, I won't spend a lot of time on it, but the process that we followed at GOSH. Hopefully it's a slide that might be helpful beyond this session, but our strategy development process was split into 3 sections, one of which I call getting under the bonnet, so really understanding the evidence, the external market. The next was identifying our growth potential and where that really lay. And then the third was identifying clear priorities that were based on our 10-year projections. And if you're interested, these are our 8 priorities that came out of our process at GOSH. We call them our 8x8. So these are our 8 priorities that we believe will deliver 8-figure net income gain over the next 10 years. So they're all big for us. And last but not least, I want to really focus on why I think aiming high with your fundraising is important. You might not always get there, but I'm a big believer in the saying that if you reach for the moon, you might get, if you aim for the moon, you might reach the stars. And I would rather a team set themselves a big ambition and they nearly get there or get almost there than aim for something that's fairly marginal year on year. I think that's when teams really think differently about how they can go about their work and get excited about being part of something big. We set a year ago what we felt as part of our strategy, a really ambitious target for our capital appeal, and that was to match what Cancer Research raised through their last big appeal. A year ago, that felt a little out of reach and, to be honest, a little bit terrifying. But a year on, we haven't formally launched our capital appeal yet, and we're 83% of the way there. And I've reflected on how we've managed to achieve so much in such a short space of time. And I believe it's because we went big that has forced us to think about what are the biggest things that will get us there, the biggest opportunities, the biggest partnerships, the biggest donors. So therefore, we've had to be really, really focused. And with some great talent, a lot of hard graft in the team and a little bit of luck, we've made great progress. And we're now at the point where we're going to have to reforecast up, which isn't something I would have predicted had I sat here a year ago. So just to summarise, my 6 top tips are to use bottom-up planning. It really helps deliver ambition. Taking a long-term view liberates thinking. Having focus is fundamental to your success. Developing scenarios give control. Using evidence and expert opinion really helps to build confidence, but it's the collaborative culture in the team that will really make the magic happen. So I'd like to finish there. I think I've used my time, Rob. I hope that was helpful in some way to some of you on the call.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Liz, for getting so much really sound examples and tools and information in a short period of time. There are many questions, and a heartfelt apology to everyone if we're not able to get to your question. It's just not going to be possible in this format, so I'm ever so sorry about that. Liz, I don't know if there is a way, if people have extra questions, are you happy to link in with people, or what's? Of
course, yeah, no, happy for you to put people in touch. Happy to talk at any time.
Thank you very much. One of the questions was about example tools or templates for helping plan the numbers in a bottom-up way. But if I were to sum up, maybe the most common theme of question I'm seeing, it was to do with from the point of view of a fairly small organisation that might not have a professional fundraiser, or might have a 3-day-a-week professional fundraiser. Do you believe that this same approach, that daring to dream for the brilliant thing that makes the biggest difference to your beneficiaries, for the dopamine hit and all those other benefits do you believe that the same principle applies? And if you do, even if they may be obvious in a way and still not easy to apply, but what are the 1 or 2 bits out of all of this you've learned in the context of large organizations that you know, how could we make it work in a small organization?
Yeah, I think that's really fair question. And I mean, again, I think what I've shared, they're fairly simple techniques, and I think they do apply across the board, because yes, I think it might be harder in a smaller organization. You perhaps don't have as many team members to draw upon, but I can't see why you wouldn't set a big ambitious goal, particularly for a small organisation. I think that often it's small organisations that need that significant growth the most. And yes, your priorities might not come out as 8-figure opportunities. They might come out as 5 or 6-figure opportunities. I think it will be appropriate and relevant to your cause. But I think lots of the tools, they're quite simple. As I've shared, they're not really rocket science. So I hope they would work overall. Rob, I have to flag, I've had this thing come up on my computer that says it's going to reboot automatically in 59.
Right. Which I totally get. So if you need to and come back in again,
I will come back.
Totally. Thank you for reassuring us. So I'm sorry if we didn't manage to get most of those questions. Do feel free to link in with Liz. Some people are asking if we're recording this. We are recording it, and we plan to share the recording earlier next week as a way of you recapping some of the detail of what Liz has shared. But lastly, my own 2 pennyworth. My approach to this is, I don't call them big audacious goals, but it's basically the same thing. I call them WIBAs, WIBA. in the sense of, wouldn't it be amazing if? My tip for if you're a small charity, say to your chair or your colleague or your friend who set up the charity with you, wouldn't it, currently we're managing to help this number of animals and this number of people, wouldn't it be amazing if we're able to help this number or add this service? And to say that in the context of the service or the delivery for the mission, not the number, not the money. And once you start getting excited by the amazing and you get the dopamine hit of the amazing, Alan Clayton does a really interesting presentation about how, you know, all of the most successful appeals and leaps in growth the charities have ever achieved. For UK charities, there's been some level of amazing goal that isn't, you know, it is just genuinely difficult. But part of that step change in delivering good is part of why it galvanizes in the way that Liz has said. So my top tip would be WIBA, ask, wouldn't it be amazing if, and then start, as I'm about to show in my presentation, working out the small steps that you can do each day to get you 1 millimeter closer to that amazing outcome that excites you. Thank you so much, Liz. Wonderful talk. And thank you for your generosity as ever in sharing your time and ideas. I'm now going to move on to the talk that I planned, if I can get my slides working, which is called the compound effect. And it's all about how you can achieve a multiplier effect by doing lots of small things that are very doable on a daily basis. So I tend to start with this story. It's not my story. I was told this story and it really changed the game for me. I heard it years ago, but the story goes like this. And it basically, it talks about the trap our brain can easily fall into. They said, once upon a time, the legendary basketball coach called Pat Riley, who's a, you know, I'm not a basketball expert or fan particularly, but I gather he's an amazing coach in the NBA. And there was a time apparently when and he's also known for being a hard taskmaster. He works really hard. His teams always work unbelievably hard in training. They're known for it. So they got to the end of this particular season, I guess, and this was, I think, the LA Lakers in the 80s, and they worked so hard. They got through to the playoff finals. I think it's 7 matches to decide who wins the whole championship. It came down to the 7th game. In fact, they were tied, and then in the last shot of the last game, they lost. They were gutted. And he was distraught. Everybody was upset. Apparently, he had a chat with his mentor that evening, and he was so worked up. He said, right, I'm going to go in, we'll have a team meeting tomorrow, and this is never going to happen to me again, to our team again. We're going to talk tomorrow, and I say we're going to work twice as hard next season, and no one will do this to us again and pick our pocket again, ever again. And the mentor said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Now, maybe this is obvious to you guys, but the point he made was, the mentor was, they've already done everything they possibly can, they think. And then if you say, I want twice as much effort, something, and it's, there's a bit of our brain called the amygdala that is good for fight or flight, keeping you safe, but it also fires fear endorphins for if you get scared by something you believe is just not possible. And the mentor said, if you say we're going to work twice as hard, they will freak out. They will either nod and smile, but they won't really be engaged, or they will rebel against you and you'll have conflict and it won't work. Here's what I suggest you do instead. Do have an honest, clear the air meeting tomorrow. Everyone needs to air how they feel about this stuff. But if you ask them, do you want to come back and make sure we win next year? And they say yes, then I suggest you have this prescription for the plan. Just ask them for a 1% improvement across each of the 5 key areas that these guys practice already. You know, I'm not a basketball expert, but let's imagine they're 1% improving in shooting accuracy, passing, fitness, dribbling, defense. Just 1% better. So he tried it. Guess what happened? Like, if you're a professional athlete, you're proud of everything you can achieve, and someone asks you for a measly 1%, are you going to rebel? Or are you going to say, yeah, I could do that? In fact, so they embraced it. And what was interesting is, while just aiming for 1% better in how accurate they are at passing or shooting, many of them achieved, but 3, 4, 5%. but it wouldn't have happened if he'd asked them for 10 or 20% from the start, if you see what I mean. So I found that that story is one genesis for me, really studying how this works, compound effect works in fundraising. The other genesis was years ago. This is quite an old photo. I don't know if some people logging on to see themselves in this photo, but this was the graduation from one of my, I think it was the corporate mastery program years ago, and it was day 6 at the end of 6 months, and we had some champagne, and we all enjoyed our certificates for all the progress we'd made in our corporate fundraising. And the photo is there to remind me of this pattern I started to notice, because on day 6 I always ask people, you've made this progress, like if you were to sum up how you did it, what was the key factor? What did you do? And I think it was Stu. I don't know if you're there, Stu, but Stu worked for a small charity. He'd made this phenomenal growth, the 20% more income for his small charity through corporate income each quarter he was achieving. I said, how have you done it? He said, do you know what? It was no single thing, but it really was a combination of so many small things I've been doing for the last 6 months, which I wasn't doing before. And they go together, and they lead to this really a surprising level of increase. And when I talk to people in our Bright Spot Members Club, they tend to say the same thing about how the progress. There's not a single bundle they watched or a single live session I do. It's a kind of a combination of various factors. You may have heard, if you're a sports fan, of Dave Brailsford, who's very successful in the cycling world, and just one of many kind of ways of summing it up is that traditionally the men's Great Britain cycling team at the Olympics used to do awfully, and then they got a bit of progress, I think the 2004 Olympics, and they won 2 gold medals, which was their best return since 1908 apparently. Dave Brailsford came in, and by 2008 and 2012, in both those Olympics, they topped the medals table, the men's cycling team for Britain, and they won 8 golds in each of those, 2008, 2012. Utterly extraordinary turnaround in fortunes. And Brailsford is quite famous for what is called the 1% effect, or sometimes called the power of marginal gains. And he said, if you look at all the different things that can lead to speed on a bike, we just found as many of those as we could, and then see if we experimented, could we tweak and get a 1% progress? And when you add those all up, then the growth is explosive. I appreciate not all of you necessarily care about sport. It might turn you right off, but I have observed a similar point being made from a different kind of person, from Mother Teresa, talking about, like, we get overwhelmed. Everything that's going wrong in the world, you can get overwhelmed. But she says part of her philosophy was to just today, what small thing can I do, and can I do it with love, and can I do it well? So this, I think, is consistent with what these high achieving sports people seem to do. So I went out and I found this book called The Compound Effect, and it's informed my approach and in my philosophy, and lots of how I teach fundraisers in our learning club and on our programs and so on. I do like this book. It's very readable. It's not about fundraising. It's just about making some progress in any area of your life. But I'd never seen this idea expressed quite the same way. In fact, one reason I like it is it's not about incremental gains or marginal gains. It's about the compound effect, in the sense of multiplier effect, which to my brain is much more enticing, because, my friend Andy, he's a cyclist. Whenever I would have these coaching meetings with him, I'll mention him in a minute, he was genuinely excited by the concept of marginal or incremental gains, because he knew what was possible from his sport. It worked for him as a cyclist. But my advice is, beware, if you already know and like that concept, beware expecting all of your team to instantly get it and love you. If they're really honest, I have found that 8 people out of 10, if you talk about marginal gains or incremental gains, they sort of deep down, if they're really honest, they don't quite buy it. It sounds so boring, so small, so like, it's really hard to get excited. There's a real power to what Liz was saying about the excitement of a big dopamine hit. If we could do this much more for the children who come to our hospital, that's exciting. Today, could you do a small thing a little bit better? honestly, for human psychology, I think there's a downside to it. But that's why I prefer the concept of compound effect that multiplies rather than adding lots of small things together. Just to show you what I mean, I know there's lots of kind of fundraiser in this group, but just one of the tools I teach people on our Major Gifts Mastery and in our learning club, it's called this fundraisers meeting checklist that I developed. And on that, it's a 2-page document which has got 9 different things you could do and think about in advance of a meeting with your supporter to maximize the chances that you will smash it in that meeting. From the Amy Cuddy stuff, which some of you know, which as little as 2 minutes power posing in the loo on the way before the meeting, literally the research suggests can lead to 15 to 20% more confidence hormones racing around your system. So you walk in to meet that important person feeling more poise and confidence than if you didn't do that. Plus a technique for how to not let yourself talk too much early in the meeting. So you maximize the chances that you can listen to them and understand them first. And a technique for handling objections. And a technique for, I mean, lots of you know my storytelling approach, for preparing things you could say about your cause that are most likely to connect and inspire them that your charity solves a problem for those beneficiaries. I've just mentioned 3 of the things in the checklist. If you have that checklist, and lots of them are so easy to do, this is the point, so that it's not overwhelming, but if you go through that checklist before a meeting with a supporter and you're ready, it's not just one of those that helps. If you do 3 or 4 of them, they combine together. And we found it really, if each of those are 2% better, you don't get a 2% better meeting. We find they multiply together to a meeting that's demonstrably feels much better, more confident, more productive for the donor as well. So that's one way I see it as multiplying together. In the same way as compound interest, if you're fortunate enough to have some savings, the reason compound interest is so powerful is any interest that accrues 1 month gets added into the lump sum that then gets interest on it that the next month. Now the challenge is for many of us, we have to or feel the pressure to just to survive, to take the money out before the compound really gets going. But for people fortunate enough to be able to leave it in, if you can leave it in long enough, really the graph starts to go up because of the multiplier effect. So again, I just there mentioned ways you can improve chances of doing your meeting with a major donor or a corporate well. But in our sessions, I don't just zoom in on the small things you can do to make that go better. I also say, what if also at the same time, we find a way to get more meetings per month, more chats with donors who could care about a cause than we did last month and the normal fundraisers ever do. So even if you're only talking to say 2 people a month, if we can, it's very doable to help you double that to 3 or 4. Now, the reason it's a multiplier effect is now in all 4 of those meetings you have per month, you've got this extra skill and confidence that I mentioned before, and it applies in all of them. Now, obviously, not every donor is going to give, but in all 4 meetings, you're showing up with a 20% greater confidence and skill. Sooner or later, that's going to turn into results in the 4 meetings you're now having, not just 2. So that's why I see it compound or multiplier effect, not incremental gains or marginal gains, which can imply, I know it doesn't actually, but some people, your team might think, what's the point in all this hard work if it only improves things by 2%? It's the multiplier effect that excites me, which is why I tend to refer to it as compound. An example that I really like of this absolutely applying, you might, if you are interested, check out episode 7 of the Fundraising Bright Spots podcast, which I did with Tony Gaston years ago, right early 2.5 years ago. And basically he talks about 2013, he came on the Major Gifts Mastery program. He was really hungry to learn and try some of these small things. And he brilliantly started to make them work. And crucially, he kept going. And then, the numbers were phenomenal. Growth. And again, it compounds. All these different factors of his progress are generating momentum. And that's why the results get really exciting in the year 5 and 6. But do check out the full story in episodes 7 and 8 of my podcast. Or I've been talking about, face-to-face fundraising, high value a lot. For a different one, I mentioned Andy, who's a keen cyclist. When he and I would meet each month when he was at Prostate Cancer UK, and we'd just have some coaching sessions and talk about the progress he and his team were making. He's a real growth mindset person. So he would always come with ideas for things he could try to grow income in their events, which is a lot of cycling events and some walking and running events and so on. And the results across that 3 years, we had those chats each month. The income went up by a phenomenal 1 million per year. And if, again, I haven't got time to go through all of these, Andy could give you a list of 20, 30 small different specific things that they tried and implemented that, not all of them worked, but, one of the simplest ones was they worked really hard to get a highlights film from the event into people's inboxes much quicker than they previously had, while the glow is still there of this hero effect of doing the sore legs. And that massively led to people rebooking. They also did some really interesting things. If you do cycling events, really worth doing if you're not doing already. They realized the competitive nature of many of these cyclists. And so they added in incentives, for rebooking or bringing more friends or doing a certain number of events per year, but also for how much money you raise. So like a Tour de France yellow jersey, first of all, they did one yellow jersey for the person who was fastest and another for the person who raised the most money. But then they just segmented it more and more. They had 3, 4, 5 different special jerseys you get to wear if you'd raised lots of money in different categories. And there are so many different things that Andy's team did actually. But I think it's a great example of this compound effect, because they all multiply together these different things you're doing, which cause people to rebook and do more events per year and gradually raise more money in sponsorship as well. So if I were to sum up, by the way, we started a tiny bit late, so I'm going to get you finished by 10 o'clock rather than 5:02, just to be clear. If I've got 5 ideas now that if you like the concept of this and it just broadly makes sense, but you're not sure, well, how do I do it, Rob? It's not easy. I've got 5 tips, and one of them includes an idea for how you can get our help for how to apply it, but honestly, you don't need to do it that way. And the 5th is my favorite story of all time, which sums up something to do with my son, where it really summed up to me the gist of what you need to do if you want to make this work. That's point 5. But the first one is just know, you get worried about achieving the big thing, or one big move could I do to get a £50,000 gift in today? What small thing could you do today that gets you closer to that? Know that the inches are all around you. And I remember Jo Baker in episode, I think 2 or 3 of my podcast, just the lengths she goes to at Child Rescue Nepal to make donors feel special. Not only does she send them lovely thank you cards, but there's more than one design of lovely thank you card. And she keeps track of which cards each donor has received. And they put lovely sparkly stickers on the back which say you're a hero or you're amazing. That level of detail, I think, is next step beyond what many charities do to make their donors feel special when they receive a letter or a card from you. These are small inches that she's finding, and they work. But here's the most interesting thing about this whole topic. In my experience, a third of the way along that line, you've been doing it, you've been exercising every day for a week and you feel a bit healthier, but only a bit. And the progress almost always feels less than you deserve because you made a big shift in your life. You're going for a run every day. Surely it should be easier by now, or I should get more rewards by now. That is the point where I have found most of us are highly tempted to give up. I remember after 3 episodes of my podcast, I was exhausted. I couldn't believe how hard it was to try and get a decent show out every week. And I really felt like giving up. And not many people were listening yet. This is the point. The universe doesn't yet reward you for all the hard work while you're priming the pump, trying to get it moving. So most of my advice in this area is, what can you possibly do to keep going in the early stages before the bigger rewards start coming back and your manager starts coming in and noticing that they're pleased with this money coming in? That's the key thing. So my next tips are basically 3 ways that you can increase the chances that you'll keep going before the bigger rewards show up. So idea 3 is the idea of seeing fundraising momentum in terms of habits to an extent more than actions. And Aristotle says this something similar about excellence is all about habits rather than doing one brilliant pitch or finding one great story to help a donor. It's about consistency week in, week out. I recently found a really interesting book that has massively helped me in this area of getting healthy habits to stick, including in my fundraising and productivity. And I explained the surprising element of making that work in episode 99 of my podcast. I haven't got time to explain it here, but do check that out. There's something about it that I predict will be different from what you've probably tried before, because it appears not to make sense. It's just, I found it weirdly powerful. Episode 99. Idea 4, it's just so much easier to get fit if you're part of a group, isn't it? That social proof effect of what those around you are doing. And similarly, that's a key thing in our members club and our mastery programs. People have always said to me, it's being part of a group helps pull you along to do more of the things rather than needing difficult willpower to pep talk yourself into it. You get pulled along by what other people are doing. So with that in mind, I'm going to spend 90 seconds now letting you know about our Bright Spot Members Club. I know there's lots of you already in it, so forgive me if I just take this minute. If you don't know about Bright Spot Members Club, 5 years ago, I created a place where I could put my best learning films, and it's been going ever since. It was going long before the pandemic, but inevitably, you might imagine it's really thrived and helped people ever more in the last 2 years. We've got 340 or so people in it. Each week, as well as a library of my training films, each week there's a 1 hour workshop or masterclass or problem solving session, as well as a community. Those sessions are with me, all kinds of different fundraising topics we help you with, from major gifts and corporate to leadership and trust and writing and gravitas and lots of different things. The reason I'm excited now is this week there's a promotion on, because we've just opened the doors after it being closed while we're sorting out some technical things. It's now open for 2 more days, so you can get, if this feels right for you, you get 15% off your individual membership of Bright Spot Members Club. We'll send out an email later this morning so you can go and find out all about what's in it and weigh up whether this is right for you. But if it is right for you, please take action tomorrow so you can get use of that 15%. And as long as you want to be a member, that 15% will still apply. To find out more, it's brightspotmembersclub.co.uk/join, brightspotmembersclub.co.uk/join, or you just take a photo of this slide, which I'll put up again in a minute. But if you're curious, don't dawdle is my main message, because the discount ends tomorrow. So to sum up, what that's worth, it's normally £42 per month to get access to my live sessions, guest sessions, and the films community, but it comes down to £35.70, including VAT. Or some people, if you've done my sessions before and you really you like my style, or the podcasts have already helped you, and it just makes sense, and you don't need to test it month by month, then you could choose to go yearly, and then that's the biggest saving, because you get 3 months for free. You get 12 months for the price of 9. I guarantee if 5 years we've worked hard at making this valuable stuff, if after 3 months you're not really pleased and feel like the quality of what we've provided isn't far more than you've paid, I will happily give £150 to your charity. I can give you that guarantee, because we know we work hard to give you some great content that does help. The only other thing to say is, if you're a team leader and you sense this would be good for your team, not just you, then do get in touch, because it gets cheaper still. If you're a team of 3 or more, it gets half price or better depending on the numbers. So if you're curious about that, I think we'll put a little link in the chat room now where you can just get in touch with me, and I'll have a little chat and explain how that all works to get those discounts and so on, if you are interested in that. But to finish off, I need to get you away. Here's my favorite story on this subject. You might remember about 5 years ago, there was a big snowy kind of snowstorm. I guess it was November, I think, or it might have been February. Anyway, they called it the Beast from the East, this cold snap. And my children said to me, because because it was a no school day because there was so much snow. They said, "Daddy, do you want a snowball fight?" And I said yes, because I thought I liked snowball fights. 45 minutes in of being pelted and 2 of them going down my neck, I was desperate for something else to do that wasn't so painful for me. So I heard myself saying, "Hey, I've got a really exciting thing we could do instead. Let's build an igloo." Well, my son Wilf was keen to do that. So there we are. We started building the walls, and we're very pleased with ourselves. You can see our satisfied smiles, and we had a hot drink. While we were having that hot chocolate, my son said to me, "Daddy, don't igloos have roofs? How are you going to get, how will the roof stay up? I don't get it. Walls is fine because it stays on top of the snow bit beneath." In fact, over that next half an hour, every other member in my family asked me the same question. And all I know is I didn't have a technical answer because as an engineer, I am utterly hopeless. Building things, Lego, all that business, I'm rubbish. All I knew was, I think it's possible. Let's just try. And so we did. We just kept putting a bit more on all of the walls, up a bit and in a bit, and up a bit and in a bit, and up a bit and in a bit, and up a bit and in a bit. And what happened was the more it went up and in, the bits of snow next to those bits sort of linked together and helped them stay up. And I'm very happy to say this is one of my favorite photos of all time. Against what I thought was kind of reasonable, weirdly, it stayed up because of what I would call the compound effect of just have faith and go up a bit and in a bit. So the weird thing is, and the reason I'm telling you this story is not just to show off one of my happy snow stories. The reason, why did I have faith that it was possible and the other 3 people in my family didn't? And I was initially baffled, and then I remembered why. The reason why was when I was 5 years old, my mum had built an igloo with me and my brother and sister in our garden. And even though I barely remembered it, the photo was there in our family photo album. And whenever it snows, our family had always reminisced about the igloo. You can make an igloo with British snow, it turns out. So deep in my brain was an example, a reference, a bright spot that made me certain that it's possible. And that, my wife's much better at building stuff than me, but what I had was a story that proved it was possible. And I suggest to you the single most powerful thing you could possibly do to help yourself plugging away during the difficult bit of the compound effect, where you're doing the right things, but the sexy results haven't shown up. The single most powerful thing you could possibly do is expose yourself regularly to stories, examples that fundraising, growth, and progress are possible. So, it's called Fundraising Bright Spots, my podcast, because it's all driven by success stories. I know, you've got to be level-headed and not get miserable, but why am I failing? Of course, some things work and some don't. But I found myself getting far more inspired if I knew someone else had made it work. That caused me to plug away. So you could listen to my podcast or anyone else's. You could read books. You could get a mentor. You could get a coach. You could get a learning club. Other ones are available. But, if you like my content, then by all means, you could experiment with Bright Spot Members Club, or you could go on a